Two quarterbacks at a career crossroads moment. That is Matthew Stafford, Deshaun Watson. Watson coming back, Matthew Stafford exiting for the rest of the season, and who knows where his career leads now. That and more this week on the Footballguys Dynasty Show. And Jordan, starting off with Matthew Stafford. The fact that they bring in Baker Mayfield, is that a needle mover in terms of tea leaves for the future? We've gotten a lot of reports and information regarding a future surgery or potential not surgery and what that might mean for Matthew Stafford NFL-wise.
Don't love it. Don't love the surgery angle of it. And the spinal contusion. That doesn't sound good. I didn't really read much into the Baker thing. Instantly, when the Baker thing happened, I said to myself, they're trying to buy a comp pick. Like that was the initial reaction that I said. It was what I said in our staff chat. They're trying to buy a third or fourth round comp pick for like his salary this year, basically. He comes in, they play him or they don't. He hits free agency. Someone picks him up, pays him, and they get a comp pick for it, right? And it was just, to me, it was a financial thing, was the first thing I leaned to. I'm sure looking and to see sort of what's there with him as well, sort of getting a audition doesn't hurt. But I thought that was the primary angle of it, honestly. And I'm surprised that other teams didn't claim him for that. Again, they probably would have been up there at the top of the board anyways to get him. But I'm surprised other teams didn't explore that. So, yeah, I mean, I don't think the Baker thing leans too much into it. But the spinal contusion aspect of this isn't super reassuring.
Yeah, the first thing I heard was that if he can continue his life, he'll not really have any symptoms or any degradation of quality of life without the surgery. But then to play in the NFL, again, he will need that surgery. And we know he's an old 34, 35 years old. And this is really the first thing. The down year did not move the needle for me. But with the way I do dynasty valuations and projections, this did move the needle. He's down into the 20s for the quarterbacks, which, you get a spot or two into the 20s, it gets dicey quick. So he's in that dicey. Obviously, he could come back, play multiple seasons. The Rams could run it back again in 2023, and he could get this surgery and everything could be fine. But I think there's a very realistic chance that we get into the offseason and he does not come back. So you have to have a non-0% on that. And frankly, 6 to 12 months ago, you had a 0% chance on that. So that's why this is where dynasty changes every day, that a player doesn't have to play to change value. And I think it's easy to just stick with priors and go, well, this is a prudent profile. This was a buy low or underrated profile with how it had been dipping. I think it can be easy. And 5 years ago, I was definitely the type of person to put my spurs into the ground and say, I am not moving inertia. But I think that is, I can still be, I probably still am, at QB 22, 23, I'm probably still above the market on him. But I also think that there's a non-zero chance that we have seen him play his last down. So I think using those things in conjunction, obviously you're not going to bail, you're not going to sell really off of this, or probably in January or anything like that, because the market's just not going to move. And I honestly think if he gets the surgery, it's like, oh, he's projected to be good for week 1. I still think he's going to be one that is probably in the QB 20s. So I think that's important, that he may turn into a buy, because I don't know if positive news 4 months from now is going to be something that really bumps him that much up as a veteran player in the offseason coming off. And the other part is, when you start looking at career arcs and comps, like he's actually below even the mark where it's like, it's one of those Eli Manning, Matt Ryan down seasons, or Ben Roethlisberger, just he had one of those, just a stinker. He'll be back. Like, it was actually worse than that the longer this progressed this year.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Like, you sort of bring up the point of, is he going to change? Right. That's a curious question to sort of think about, timing the market. One of the things that I think is more art than it is science is trying to time these things. And I think you sort of hit on a point. If you buy now and you hold, and he sort of comes back in September, and week 1 he's a starter, does his price really move up that much? Versus
How
if we
good does he
buy
have to produce to move up that much too?
right, and again, I still think at that cost he's an under, like if he's going to be in the 20s, that's the bet you make in the 20s. That's a great bet historically to make in the 20s. A guy like Stafford, that's healthy, it crushes that price. But I think you sort of hit on another point, which is that if obviously if he doesn't come back great, that's a lost asset. I think how you balance it out is at this point in the calendar, like you take shots that you think long term can be difference making players, and if he's going to be in the 20s of dynasty startup drafts in January, like and we have uncertainty still about his injury status, I think you have to be in on that, because the downside is he doesn't play, but you can certainly miss from a different position just as easily in a January draft.
Yeah, but I'm not seeing enough movement right now. Like some of the buys were like today, Jared Goff plus. Like that's you can want to fade Jared Goff as much as you want, but he's in a different age bracket. He's in a different production bracket right now. He's in a different profile bracket he's going to be in the NFL. So, and to say that he has less upside than Matthew Stafford is frankly at this point in their relative careers not true. So that's an example, or pivoting downward from a core level wide receiver, a quarterback to Stafford plus. That's also not the right way to do things. That's not in any textbook in America, and certainly not one for the show. So I think you have to be really careful where drafting him as QB 24 in a startup draft is different. Poking around and sending a third and some other player that you'd be looking to flip and getting Stafford for a spec bet. These are completely different things than selling, than giving Goff plus or pivoting from a top 5, 6, 7, 8 quarterback downward and like, I'm winning. I got a starting wide receiver plus Stafford plus this. No, you might have lost a critical element of your super flex team.
Yeah, totally. He's the right. When you speculate on an asset, you don't speculate with proven things. You speculate with unproven things, right?
Throw a third, throw another player, throw another third. You keep doing that. And if they don't want to sell,
package up to it. You don't package, you don't take a package moving down to that profile for sure. Totally with you on that. I think too, the interesting part, like I know our discussion on this was supposed to center around Stafford and Watson, but you brought up Goff. I'm super interested in two guys going into this offseason in terms of guys that are actually producing right now to varying degrees, Geno Smith and Goff, because both of those guys, right? We always have this test. It's you and I, we've talked about this for a while, I think on and off shows, but it's always a conversation which we've been is like, hey, can this guy kind of play himself out of competition for a top 5 pick, right? And both of those guys have done so, right? Goff has played really well, or I think better than expectation, right? They have played better than varying degrees of expectation. But I think he's not the dead fish that everyone thought he was, when he got traded to Detroit. Geno Smith has far surpassed anything that we could have reasonably expected of him. Both teams, I think, are, the Lions should hit their win over this year. The Seahawks, I think, already have. Right? So both teams have sort of performed better than expectation. And yet they're still going to face probably top 5 picks and have to dodge them. So I'm super interested in that. I think Geno, like Goff's cheap enough that he actually might be marketable in terms of his contract, but Geno is a free agent. And I think that's just such a fascinating question about what you do team direction wise.
Because Tom Brady is like one of the only guys, Kirk Cousins, another one that actually hit true free agency.
Yeah. Kirk Cousins is
you don't get looks at NFL quarterbacks in this way with this vehicle of acquisition. Just free. I mean, they have got to tag him. They have got to, put the tag on him to actually retain and not let him float out there into the wilderness.
You have to tag him, right? You have no choice.
That's always like a step one, right? Like even if you intend to trade, it buys you more time.
Right.
Correct. And the whole, you can still negotiate a deal. You can trade him and that future team, has him under contract. So yeah, I think Geno Smith is, and we said career crossroads. That could almost be rewriting careers as well. Jared Goff, like you said, dead fish. That's not a bad analogy of just people thought it was an ancillary complete throw into a deal when, let's look at another player like Noah Fant. Actually, the way they're using him looks like
Was
a
a
throw into a deal.
Yeah.
That's what a
It's
throw
like
into a deal
salary
feels
filler
like.
in the NBA,
Like
right.
the Jared Goff was looking like, oh, well, we're taking on his money, and that's almost why you're getting a pick. We're paying to take cap. And then and then Geno Smith again on the wreckage crew of career arcs, and here he is, playing like a guy that within his class. Oh, this could be the first quarterback off the board. This could be a top 10 pick. Didn't work out that way, but now you're seeing him almost a decade later. It's just wild stuff.
Yeah.
I wanted to for Deshaun Watson. It was one of the most not baffling, the most confusing weeks. Because so we finally got to the point he's playing. Week 13, he is active and he is slated to start for the Cleveland Browns. And this was probably a singular thing, which was Deshaun Watson projection, Deshaun Watson lineups, probably the single longest or fastest moving conversation for Footballguys staff chat that we've had in quite some time.
Right.
Because there were two factions of the I have him at QB6. I have him at QB7. I have him easily in the top 10. And then there was the other faction, which was this guy hasn't played in 700 days or whatever it was. And how can he not be rusty? Even if they are going to win, they're not going to lean on him against Houston. And how can it possibly go well? Those are the two factions. His start rate was somewhere in the middle. I think it was QB 10 to 14, somewhere in that range on my fantasy league. But the Footballguys projection, I think it settled at QB 7. Obviously, he produced QB 30, I believe. So only Lamar Jackson, who missed most of the game, was the lone true starter that finished below him. And you watch that game and you see some positive. I think most people would say it was overtly negative. And it was just an interesting week when you started it and you go, because our whole dialogue was we've been waiting. And when we have Deshaun Watson, it kind of feels weird if you don't put him in your lineup. And then the other part was, well, what you going to get? He's Schrodinger's cat. Who knows how this is going to go? And you got one of the lower bands of outcomes, in my opinion. But we also talked all off season about how, okay, he's going to come back late in the year, quote unquote, we're not going to trust him because he hasn't played. He's coming in midstream, and we're going to be, in critical zones of our dynasty calendar for our team and playoff push and all this. But yet we get here. How did you handle it, Jordan? Did you start him anywhere? Most of the places? Mismatch? What happened?
So I started him in one spot, and I started him in a spot where I was actually an underdog. And I said to myself, I can't remember the specific who the other quarterback was. I'm trying to remember who it was, but I went through this long dialogue in my head about if I start him, basically, I might have been over Andy Dalton. That might have been the decision process. And I said, well, listen, like, I'm an underdog to this guy who has Lamar Jackson. He had he had a good team, but Lamar Jackson features prominently in this story. I'm an underdog, and so I need ceiling. And I said, I'm going to ride with Watson, because if I don't get a good Watson game, I'm probably going to lose anyways. Right. So that was kind of what I did. Lamar Jackson, of course, gets hurt and basically produces, negligible points in the scoring format. And if I'd started the other quarterback, I think it was Dalton. If I'd started him, I would have won. And I was like, I mean, the process mattered, I thought was right, but the outcome really wasn't great. Yeah. So that was the one real spot that I put him in. I had another winner go home. Well, I had a game where I really need to, I'm battling for just a points-based wild card. I played Geno Smith over him, which I thought a lot about. Again, that same sort of conversation about how much ceiling can I get. I ended up getting a ton of ceiling out of Geno, and that really changed the arc of my season there. So that was a good decision. But the other one, I don't necessarily fault the process. It's just, an injury kind of turned it bad in a way that, if Lamar Jackson was good, the other decision wouldn't have mattered anyways. It's the only thing that sort of made it close was the fact that Lamar got hurt. So, that's that you just give that one to the game.
Yeah, and again, we talked about it basically being a lost season. So who knows? I think it definitely does set you back probably in confidence level for until you see it. And I think that's what we talked about months ago, which is you'll kind of need to see him looking like himself. And then that would be the trigger point to possibly put him in. Because if you're heading towards the playoffs, or you're there, you're 7-6, you're 8-5, whatever, that you've gotten there without him at all. He's been a zero. So to say that you have to have him is not true. And like you said, hitting on a Geno Smith or even an Andy Dalton or these functional guys have been playing 3+ months, having all the reps and timing and all that Watson is just not going to have. Like the most glaring play was he, in the red zone, he seemed all hyped up and he just throws this laser over the middle, almost like to who, to where, to why, and expecting it to go through a keyhole and find somebody, and it ended up being an interception. And other than that, he was very controlled. They did a lot of movement. They got him on the edge, and he didn't have to make a lot of tough throws, and it was very controlled. The defense pretty much won the game. But it was that one moment of, oh, he's not, it just takes time. Like you just can't expect him to see it and have the speed of everything from seeing it, decision making, and then releasing, accuracy, like the whole thing, chemistry, timing. So that was the one moment that got me of like, yeah, we really gotta, that QB7 talk was one that was, really, really trying to shoot finite and small outcomes here, because he may get there, but I'll say, I mean, I think the discussion you were talking about and Geno probably in retrospect, probably not that difficult because he's been playing so well. But I think more in the Andy Dalton or in the bottom 5, 6, 7 quarterbacks, that's probably where it becomes a lot easier to play Watson as opposed to someone in the top regularly for us in the top 15 to 18.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like, because I was watching this, I literally was watching the game and he's bouncing balls, he's missing. And I was like, it literally looks like a major league pitcher who, instead of throwing like BP fastballs, just can't hit. Like he's throwing sliders and they're just bouncing in the dirt. It was like, and no one's buying it, right? He's throwing 0-2 sliders that she's trying to get people to chase. And it's just like, he's just missing, right? And
they weren't even starting in the zone, right?
Right. And I was kind of like, okay, like that's, and the red zone interception. I mean, geez, Josh Allen's playing like an MVP level, and he did that like a couple of weeks ago, and everyone had a fit. So I mean, not a ton. I mean, let's be honest with ourselves for a second. Take away all the off field stuff about Deshaun Watson. He's the NFL. He's the active leader in yards per attempt. Right, of the active quarterbacks that qualify, he's the leader in terms of yards per attempt. The guy can play quarterback, right?
Well, and
over
here's
the long
thing.
term, he's going to bounce back.
And the only cross section of his entire career so far where you would have made even an approachable argument to say that he had top 5, top 8 weapons around him was when he had DeAndre Hopkins combined with a healthy and vibrant, absolutely at his peak, Will Fuller. Mm-hmm. That was the only time you would have said his weapons were in the top quartile of the NFL. So, and he was doing it. Yeah. And I would just remind folks that it'll be very interesting. Well, my brain's going everywhere, but the main point was that I wonder if this is going to negatively affect his value if he doesn't have a giant pop game before the end of the season.
I mean, if he doesn't have up another buying opportunity,
right?
I'm all
it continues, right? Exactly, yes. It continues.
Yeah.
Because again, reminder, you just said about yards per attempt. Before this prolonged absence, he had finishes of QB5, QB2, and QB7 in his first 4 seasons of adjusted points per game. And he was right there in the very short conversation with Patrick Mahomes as the best young quarterbacks, and not hyperbole, best quarterbacks. That was synonymous. I mean, obviously Brady and Rodgers and all those guys were younger at that point in time, but basically he was in that conversation. And we, Mahomes has gone one way and Watson has gone another over the course of 2 years. Josh Allen, a bunch of other quarterbacks, but Watson was right there. And I do think unless he puts it together, and the Browns aren't going to the playoffs. So I don't think with Brissett they were going to the playoffs. I don't think with Watson they're going to the playoffs. But if he doesn't pop off for like a 303 game or run for 75 yards and a touchdown plus a couple through the air, if he doesn't put one of those on tape, then I do think this window is going to continue at least until maybe they add something in the draft, or they bring in a free agent that notably upticks the passing game outlook or something like that. Or we see in redraft, it becomes August and he's QB 10, there in redraft, or something like that has to happen for it really to move the dynasty needle, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, down off of him being a glaring buy, you would say, right? Is that what you're?
Yeah, well, get it closer to what to decrease the profit potential.
Right. Yes, I'm with you. Yeah, I listen. You buy the profile, and you don't let one game. Right. We bought the profile all along because we said the profile is really good. You don't let one game change it, right? And my joke is
this
that
is like fading a rookie running back because you're like, it looked a little slow in his first preseason game.
Yeah, this is like, it's
Same
like, it's the same. Yeah, right. I mean, we could pick one. I don't know, James Cook, right? Or people that were sort of poo-pooing Christian Watson start to the season, and all of a sudden, like, both of those guys could be difference makers here down the stretch. So, yeah, I mean, I kind of have this saying, like, don't let anything that could happen on your bike ride super change your dynasty opinion. And this is a classic example of that. So one game, I'm not impacting that in terms of his price. Again, if this goes on for like 6 weeks and all of a sudden like he just can't buy a strike, we'll talk about it then. But I can't
But then you know what? If he's still doing that in week 17, then guess what his price is going to be in the offseason? It might be QB 17.
Stafford level.
Yeah, it may go there. Right.
Right. Yes.
And then you give him a full
begs
offseason.
The question, do we actually want to root for that? Like, do you want to root for him just not being able to find
more shares? I know we're kind of perverse in that way. Like sometimes we'll be like, well, we have some, but what if we could get them all?
like the Statue of Liberty. Bring me your poor, your tired, your huddled masses. Like, give me all your depressed assets.
Exactly. Get the crop report on frozen concentrated orange juice. Episode 131 of the Football Guys Dynasty Show. Chad Parsons, Jordan McNamara. I want to remind you about the Football Guys official gear and merch store. That classic Black Eyed Joe logo, quality designs, materials from outerwear like hats, shirts. You can also go coffee mugs. I don't know if we have mouse pads and various other accoutrements in there yet, but you want to go over there at shop.footballguys.com and you're going to get everything you need in terms of representing and sporting the site that helps you win more and do it in an easier, more concise, more optimized fashion.
It's time for the Stash of the Week, powered by Sleeper.
Sleeper stash of the week time, and we got a little geeky because sometimes it's shallow. This is going deep, and this is going in terms of, I was thinking back to Tim Hightower. I was thinking back to Damian Williams, these names that you squint a little bit when you first mention it, but it could absolutely come into reality. And Jordan, we were active and definitely had our ears to the ground with talking with Gene Bramble this past week about Joe Mixon, and discuss that a little bit because our sleeper is actually basically like 2 or 3 steps away right now, which is Travion Williams there in Cincinnati, a name to not lose track of, especially with critical news items coming out that most people might not be tracking this week.
Yeah, my spidey senses on Mixon had gone up. Dr. Gene sort of gave us some really good lens with which to look through this. I will note over at his Monday injury rounds on the site, he does have he basically lays it out, which is really great, talking about the progression through the concussion protocol. So I'll point you there. He does have a Monday update that says, according to Coach Zach Taylor, it was a team decision to hold Mixon out on Sunday. There's no concern for setback, and he's expected to return to practice and play. So let's see. This is kind of almost a conditional sleeper stash of the week, in the sense of, like, if we get that he's a participant early in practice, a full participant on Wednesday, then you feel pretty confident he can play on Sunday. If he's a limited participant on Wednesday, that's a source for further concern. So that's really kind of like the angle of it. Again, the news from Zach Taylor is helpful, I think, in terms of how to think about this, and that's a reassuring sign for his future. But I sort of come back to this, and we talked about this before. Like, if you blind resume this thing, wouldn't Pirine be the starter for the rest of the season? Like, well, I'm interested to the reality with which Joe Mixon comes back to.
Right. Because Pirine, we go all the way back to the playoff game, and he was in there in a critical spot, not Joe Mixon. I've been pretty critical of Joe Mixon. He's having a better year, but he doesn't have juice the 10-yard runs don't turn into 20-yard runs very often, and 20 never turns into 50, and the 5 runs stay 5 to 7 yards. Like, he has a tough time creating big plays on his own. In my opinion, he has a tough time escaping and actually turning yards out from that first contact or first defender in his face. So I've been pretty critical of that. And we've talked about the Alexander Madison effect, which is, I mean, Pirine is seeing a higher majority than many of these games that Mixon was. And the other part that surprised me, and why we're mentioning Trevion Williams, is I thought if you put, not truth serum, but just, hey, Chad, what do you think about, down the depth chart there in Cincinnati? Chris Evans, I was pretty bullish on, but they've used him. They have been so resistant to give him any more than sporadic targets or split out. We like him as a receiver. Nothing more is what they've told us over and over again. And you know what? I'm finally going to listen. I'm finally listening. That Chris Evans, I think, is probably a road to nowhere. That's a stash player into the offseason, road to nowhere. Stash player from now till the end of the season, road to nowhere. This past week, Trevion Williams, 11 snaps, Chris Evans, 2. Yeah. And routes, 6-2, edge to Williams. Let's stop dancing with Chris Evans. Stop doing this. So Trevion Williams, who was actually productive in college, he might be a little undersized, but he's always been a talent. He's hung around. This is almost Rex Burkhead, like just lingering around that Bengals depth chart. And I think if we have Mixon out, which, again, this could be a critical week, he might miss multiple weeks still. If he doesn't practice Wednesday, Thursday, something like that, that you need an injury away to the injury away. And Pirine would now be up to 3 games, 4 games. Let's keep going with this he has not played that much in a while. That many consecutive snaps, high workload games since maybe early Washington time. So Trevion Williams could be that Damian Williams type that all of a sudden, critical week 15, week 16, it is Trevion Williams. So this is a longer term play. You might hold him for a month. You might just hold him till Joe Mixon comes back. That's really all you have to do. We play these games with timing all the time. So Trevion Williams, he's, I would say, almost universally available. So this is not for shallow leagues. We're not talking about FFPC or 22 man, but when you're in the mid 20s, definitely high 20s, consider it. And it's not you hold him and Mixon's out this week and Pirine doesn't get hurt. You go, those guys are a bunch of dopes, and you drop them. You have to be in for this, in for a dime, in for a dollar until Mixon comes back.
Right. It could even be as simple as you put in a waiver claim on this Wednesday. I wouldn't blow the bank on this, right? This is a stash.
Oh no, he'll go for $1. You don't have to worry about it.
And then you get to Monday, or you get to Sunday, right? And Mixon's active. And you just say, okay, let's recycle the pick, and we'll go pick up somebody else. There's, heck, there has been depth chart news literally every Sunday at this point for about a month, right? Where you can absolutely, if you're sort of grinding through this from the 11:30 to 1 hour, which I do. I know you've gone to the Saturday lineup setting. I still spend that hour and a half because you get inactive news, you get other stuff that can sort of help you, be maniacal about it. I will say I have seen this. I don't know if it's theme is the word I'm going to go with. This narrative building. Hey, it is rookie draft time. We're thinking about rookies. We're draft prepping, all this stuff. If that's the biggest, all I can see, I'm like Scrooge McDuck, diving into money when I see people doing that, because I'm like, you're giving up, you're spending your time doing other things while we're spending our time winning. This is a classic example of that, right? This is the sort of approach that I think winning teams, you do this, you continue to do this. And what you're trying to just improve is your odds, right? You're just trying to improve your odds a little bit here, a little bit there. And that can really add up, right? That can really add up. This is a classic example of that. Use the week, and then, hey, listen, Mixon's going to be good to go. We get the Saturday night, tweet barrage from Rappaport, Schefter. He's good to go. He's cleared. Boom. Sunday morning, we're going to make a move. We're going to move off of Trevion Williams, but it was worth the time and energy to just take the look, peek, see, because again, the injury away guys can really move the needle. There's 2 things at this point that can move the needle: a spot start from a quarterback and a spot start from a running back. Otherwise, you're not going to feel comfortable. Mitchell Wilcox is going to get a start this week. Who cares?
There it is.
Right.
Yeah. And honestly, the past 2 or 3 years, it's been less and less the time and bandwidth I spend on NFL draft stuff and future rookie classes, because we have plenty of time. I remember I used to wait and I used to wait until the underclassmen were declared. That was mid-January. and then it starts accelerating where it's like, oh, January 5th, January 1st, December 14th. Like you just, but yeah, your bandwidth has to be on this year. When it's over, you can spend as much time as you want on whatever off-season variants as you want. And but the point is we're not there yet. And the point is the only teams or the only dynasty GMs that would care are the teams that are out of it.
Right.
Because otherwise, and that implies that all your teams are out of it. Because if you have one team in it, tractor beam on that. You're having teams every week fall out of it, where their most important game is now week 1 next year. And when that happens, then focus more on the other teams. Do your last waiver, pretty much your last waiver wire run for the teams that are out of it. Collect all the upside offseason stash guys you want. Churn that out, but then you're basically done. Outside of other teams dropping players that you're interested in, you're done. You're done for the season. Trade deadlines probably in the past, but focus more on the remaining 10 teams, 8 teams, 4 teams as it keeps going down that are still in it. And yeah, these micro moves. This is how you grind your way to more spot starts and having the one or the two that actually matter and move the needle for you.
And play keep away too. You know what I mean?
Oh, exactly.
I had a professor tell me one time, and I'm sure he stole it from someplace, but he said the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. Right? And my main thing right now is to win. That's all I care about. That's all I want to do. I want to win.
You can't win 2023 today.
You can't win 2023. You can't win 2024, but we can win right now, right? We can improve our odds right now. And so the main thing is to keep that winning.
That's the main thing. The current year. It's amazing. It's the current year.
It's contrarian. Like you look at all the people, I'm so excited about.
Well, also look at the waiver wire interest, right? I mean, It seems like the past week or two, less people are bidding.
Absolutely.
They're just not tuned in.
Absolutely. And the other thing too is again, we're talking about fantasy football. So let's sort of, there's a lot more serious thing going on, but in the context of it, it's a lot of time. It's a lot of energy to sort of pay attention for 17 weeks. Like it's a 4-month, and there's different spots of the season where I tune out, and this is what we do for a living, right? Like it can be tough to sort of get up every week to do that.
Person, yeah.
Right. But if you keep going, right, if you just keep grinding through it and just keep, and just keep saying, I'm going to try and get every edge, and just keep sort of working through it and don't get distracted. Don't see all the bells and whistles. Don't look down the line until to April, right? Like
that's how you take the luck out. To be fair, there's plenty of luck involved, but that's how you reduce the luck. That's how you mitigate it or put it in your favor.
Absolutely.
That's how you end up with the guy.
Yeah.
You end up with the running back where again, someone starts looking for who's available the next week.
Right.
These are the scenarios. Oh, someone picked up Travion Williams on Friday. Oh. And then Monday, Mixon's still not cleared. Pirine out. Travion Williams, 14 touches over the last 2.5 quarters. In the game on Sunday, not available.
Right.
Don't let someone just walk into that.
Yes.
Oh, I have the most waiver dollars. This is what I've been saying. I have 80% available. First of all, that's a wrong answer. I have 80% available in week 14, 15. And, now I can just plunk it down and buy whatever I want.
Right.
The obvious, the low-hanging fruit, the easy answer, the easy button. Don't give them easy buttons. Make them all hard buttons.
Yes.
Trading's closed. So that means all my guys are close to you too. All the guys I picked up ahead of you. All right, let's talk some dynasty trades. There's still plenty of deals out there because there's plenty of leagues out there that are still open for business. This first one, team falling out of it in a super flex format. Doesn't really apply here because no quarterbacks or picks are involved. Team falls out of the race. They sell Christian McCaffrey, Chase Claypool for DeAndre Swift. Looking better. This past week was definitely a sigh of relief in terms of usage. He's back to the number 2/ almost 1B, 1A role. And so DeAndre Swift, Javonte Williams, and KJ Osborne.
This is fascinating, and I could go. I'd love to know a little bit more about this. Would sort of be like, what's your 2023 look like? Again, you and I are sort of in the mold of, hey, if we're falling out of it this year, that means next year we're all in, right? We're pushing we're focused on that, right? Not 2024, not 2025. We can win next year. It's a lot of time between now and a year from now when you're going to be pushing in for a playoff spot next year. So a lot of things can happen in that lens. For me, I would take the McCaffrey side because you have enough uncertainty on the other side that I don't love it. And we were never huge fans of Javonte Williams at his cost. He's coming off an ACL injury. We have our sort of concerns about that. I'm not sure what's going on with Swift, but it's given me enough pause to say, like, it's just enough that I'm just sort of side-eyeing it, and I say I don't know what's going on there. I know that when McCaffrey steps on the field in any given week, he has running back one in his range of outcomes. Give me that profile right now. I can figure it out later on if I want to make a pivot. That's the angle which I would play this if we want to sort of talk about it in August and when we have more information. I'm interested in doing that, but give me the surest thing right now, looking forward.
Yeah. I think the raw value is on the other side. That said, I understand every single thing you just said because that could go categorically wrong. I'll make the pitch for the other side. Not that I if I'm in a league that this has to be the way that this deal goes down, but with DeAndre Swift and with Javonte Williams, you look at the quality years remaining. That I mean, you're talking about a 23-year-old, and Javonte Williams will be 23 next year. So you'll have 24 and 23, the two running backs you're acquiring, two guys that have shown to varying levels, have shown quality production / ceiling. Christian McCaffrey will be 27 at a point that, I mean, Adrian Peterson, maybe LaDainian Tomlinson, like there's not many guys that 27 into 28 retain value. And of course, insert comment that who you building your team for, that liquidity is not super important with every single spot on your roster. But 27, they've already talked about managing a knee. And if you're out of it, the next important game with Christian McCaffrey on your team is week 1 next year. So you don't get the playoff run this year. I have Swift and Javonte Williams in the next tier below Christian McCaffrey. So relatively speaking, it's a no-brainer if you're out of it to do a deal like this. I do think the twists and turns, that's the only reason you're getting Swift and Javonte Williams is because of the risk and because of the things that have occurred. If you substitute different names, like you're not going to get, let's say Nick Chubb and DeAndre Swift. You're not going to get, in this same scenario of a contender buying Christian McCaffrey. So you're not going to get as much warm fuzzies as you would like. And that's why you're getting 2 shots for 1, basically.
Right.
So,
right.
And I do think it's a good thing that we've gone this long discussing this trade, and neither one mentioned Chase Claypool because he basically doesn't matter. And I think
you don't let the ancillary parts of a trade get in the way.
Well, you definitely don't let Chase Claypool affect it.
100%. Nor KJ Osborne. Like those, just set them aside. Whatever on that.
I just think Claypool has too much bandwidth in the marketplace for what he's actually doing and the trajectory he's on. So
right.
That was more.
The one thing I would frame around this would be which players in this deal have something that could seismically harm their cost. And I think that both of the players that have that are on the other side of this deal. Denver doesn't have another running back really rostered. I don't think Mike Boone, but again, we're talking about Mike Boone. Is Denver going to go a full off season with this market, by the way, a really good rookie running back class, a really good free agent class as it stands right now, and not address the position when they have a guy coming off an ACL? There's about a 0% chance that happens. Right. So the idea that Latavius Murray walks in week 1 as the running back 2 without any competition is an almost 0% bet. The same thing is true with Swift. Jamal Williams is a free agent. We don't necessarily know this. There might be coaching changes in both teams, right? I tend to think Dan Campbell's safe, but you don't know. There's a real good chance that Denver's preferences change with Nathaniel Hackett potentially being gone, right? And all of a sudden, right, you take one of those 2 guys gets the Kerryon Johnson treatment, and which is a second round running back, coming in on top of them, and all of a sudden you're like, I'm in a lot of trouble on this trade. Right?
And then your 2 outs turned into 1 out.
Yeah. Exactly. And then you're threading the needle. That's why, again, I would hold this. And the reason that I would hold this is because guys up at the top of the board, once you start coming down from top 5, top 6 guys, the risk gets a lot bigger. And we see that especially early on in the calendar. It really, really adds up really quickly. The hit rates really drop. And it's because there's so much risk for guys like that. That's really my concern for that. Again, I understand the other side of the deal and you're getting a 2-for-1 shot. I would rather have McCaffrey right now and sort of figure it out later on if I'm trying to reshape my team.
Would you say a lot of the dialogue you have going with Javonte Williams, do you have less risk attached to Breece Hall of the going on top of the not likely to keep, quote unquote, keep his job that he left?
I mean, Zonovan White's going to come in and take it. It sounds like from all the reports, he's going to take his job. I mean, I'm a little spooked. I'll be honest with you. I'm a little spooked on the ACL plus knee injuries right now. Dobbins, right? We've seen this with Gus Edwards as well. We've seen this with a bunch of guys that have not come back, the full stretch. I mean, heck, Barkley, right? You don't even need to leave the city of New York, or I guess the stadium. They're not really technically in the city of New York. To see sort of that takes some time, right? So those knee injuries, and Javonte Williams has one as well. Like those knee injuries, I think we've taken them for granted because it's been guys like Adrian Peterson have come back and looked like they were never human, and they probably weren't. We have seen them be a little bit more complicated. I think we've taken them for granted as maybe a dynasty, as a dynasty community, seeing them come back the next year being full strength. I think that's a conclusion that a lot of people are jumping to that I'm not willing to do anymore.
And how many running backs give you a better chance to win your league in 2023 than McCaffrey?
Yeah, I mean, and listen, like you pair McCaffrey with a couple of other good players. Like, I mean, there's a couple of leagues where I have a Mahomes Allen stack with a couple of wide receivers and like some spot start running backs, and like that alone will get you really far.
Yeah.
McCaffrey is the type of guy that can do that for you. I get the fact that he's aging. I think his game ages well, right? I don't think the stuff that we've seen him get hurt with is any sort of signs that he's brittle. Right? It hasn't been sort of that.
He could catch 80 passes 3 years from now in his sleep.
100%. Eckler's the same way. Like Eckler's smashing the position at reception. I mean, just destroying the position at receptions. And you're like, okay, how does that age? Like it ages pretty well, And so
because they could always morph into a 1B receiving centric guy.
Totally. I mean, yes,
like a juiced up Colts version of Nyheim Hines.
Right. Or like the, a little bit better version of what Swift has been recently, right? Like I'm not even knocking Swift when I say that, but like where you have the Jamal Williams to a DeAndre Swift. So again, there's a lot of these. I think Christian McCaffrey is uniquely situated too, right? So if you were to talk some other players sort of in that range that are maybe older, like if this is, obviously you're probably not getting a deal like this done for Chubb. It's probably specific for McCaffrey, but that's again why I have sort of the attachment that I have is because he, him and really him, it has the biggest upside of any running back in any given game, right? Like of any given season, really. Like we've seen him have as big of upside as anyone, dating back to guys that are in the Hall of Fame, right? So like LT level stuff, right? Daniel Thompson level stuff. So we've seen that, and I have a hard time sort of shipping that away.
Let's do one more trade this week. We've got Superflex Skyy Moore being traded for a 23-second shading on the early side.
This is recycling the pick, right? Isn't this just recycling? Just
late first to an early second, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think Skyy Moore has done anything to really change his value too much, right? I think one of the aspects of wide receiver drafting that I've really come to appreciate is when you take a guy like Skyy Moore, you can make this deal a year out, almost independent of how he performed. Like at worst, you do this deal, right? And that's actually when you don't have a ton of great options in a draft, right? That's actually not a bad place to go, right? I tend not to load up on a bunch of wide receivers, but I see the value that this is available to you if you choose to sort of go this route in a rookie draft. And basically what you're doing is getting a look-see at a guy and hoping that he's Christian Watson. And if he's not, then you can recycle the pick. So I kind of like this deal because you preserve your flexibility and you create some roster spots now, and you reset the clock on a player that frankly we haven't seen him overtake guys like Justin Watson yet. So I'm fine recycling the pick.
Yeah, and I think staying flexible is the key part because in that zone you could get a look potentially at a first-round quarterback that you like. It could be a day two running back, but you also get yourself back into the game of a liquid asset, and you can sit there and pick off whatever veterans could be highly discounted when you're in the rookie draft. You don't like the board. That could also be a key aspect of, hey, this ends up being 202, and maybe you package 202 and 210 and you get a 24 first. Maybe it's 202 and you're going to slide back. Maybe this is what helps you move up from 110 to something critical in the mid first round. So Skyy Moore, and we know that wide receivers in general, pretty particular tastes, and half the league may not be interested. And so the pick is a lot more liquid, and just it might be a slight loss, or I might be giving up the wide receiver one for Patrick Mahomes. Yeah, maybe, but like you said, didn't pop off right away. And not that it couldn't never happen, but keep in mind the Chiefs, if they lose Juju and they're kind of rehashing their wide receiver core, that means they're adding to it as well. Let's not pretend like Skyy Moore wasn't Watson like 33 or 34 overall in the draft. I mean,
Right.
Skyy Moore fell later than a lot of people thought he would.
Yes.
Oh, possible first rounder. Well, he didn't, and I think we have to be open to that when we see a player fall that, we thought he should go way higher. Well, he didn't. And the whole NFL passed. And so maybe he isn't the guy. So let's be open to that, because day two wide receivers generally are a big trap. They're a big trap of like, they're really good. Well, they're not first rounders. And so to assume that they're really good, they weren't that good. And I think that's going to be something we always heavily discuss. And there's a lot of risk. And that's why not a Debbie discussion, but I mean, you take a wide receiver in college, if you value them highly, or you spent a high price to get them and they end up a day two pick, you kind of go, you don't feel great about that. It's round one or bust. Kind of like quarterback. You kind of need one draft outcome to feel good about it. Otherwise, it's like, I could have just waited on the sidelines and maybe drafted him later if I like it.
Yeah.
All right. We got a couple quotes here from the Footballguys Dynasty Forum this week. You aren't getting Dameon Pierce for a single late first in many leagues. I'm seeing him ranked as high as running back 10 going forward on some sites, and it's projected a second or third round ADP for startup drafts.
I saw him ahead of Najee Harris on a popular website this week, and I about broke down laughing. I think it's overcooked, right? And again, this is kind of what you see. One of the things I found, I'm doing some research for the 2023 edition, and one of the things that I found was, what profile actually decreases in volume from year one to year two? It's actually fourth round running backs, and I don't know why that is, but it's interesting that you sort of got this really juiced up, this hyped up Dameon Pierce profile at the beginning of the season. It was sort of going well, and now it has faded, right? And it has faded for a variety of reasons, right? He probably was never that good, and the team struggles, right?
And guess what? He wasn't a workhorse in college.
Right.
He just went through 2.5 months of the biggest workload he's had since probably high school. I'd have to go back and look up, maybe more than high school.
Right. And so that gives me a lot of there's a lot of reasons to sort of, that is just a prior, again, I'm not saying that there's an overarching conclusion to take from that, but that is what the base rate would suggest to us. It gives me a lot of pause and trepidation. And then you sort of watch how this plays out and you're like, all right, did they add competition? Right. Again, they're a team that could have a lot of space, right? Is this a team that could land a guy like Barkley, right? Is this a team that tries to make a splash into the offseason with a changing front office and the like there? So I don't know how that's all going to unfold, but he's not the safe type of profile. I'd rather have a first round pick. I really would, because again, you preserve your flexibility, and I'm going to like the profile better. Would
Top
be
3 rounds of a startup draft is frightening.
Yeah.
Frightening. That's even more frightening because it's an initial team build than making the dynasty trade or holding him instead of trading him for a first or whatever.
Right.
Wow.
Right. Yeah. How about him over Najee Harris? That's like dynasty malpractice, right?
Yeah.
You're gonna have. I'm not sure exactly where Najee Harris is, but he's got a chance to finish as a first 2-hit guy. 2 hits in back-to-back years. By the way, he led the league in running back receptions last year, and I don't know if anyone's talked about that, but that's not an easy accomplishment, right? There's literally one guy every year that does that, and it's for it to be a rookie is pretty uncommon. Again, he's inside the line this year. Has it been great? No, but no one in that offense has been great. Why?
Do you have
Because they got
do you have offhand what was the last rookie running back that led the NFL?
I don't.
or
I
was
need to
even-
find that. I'm going to tweet that this
I know
week.
Reggie Bush caught a bunch of passes. I remember, but it certainly wasn't. I highly doubt it was the NFL lead. But even
Yeah.
like being in the top 2 or 3 of the position.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I don't remember it happening recently. I mean, did Barkley do it? That would be the
I know
only
he went for
person
high
recently I
total
can
yards
remember.
in year 1. Yeah. Anyway,
Be the
so
only person I
that's a
can
good
remember, yeah.
that's a good trivia question for folks for next week if you want to get back to
Yeah.
us on that.
Yes.
All right. This is more, I'm using the noun, the pronoun his, but this could be applicable. It's more of a general conversation point. His value will go down each season, but that does not make him quote unquote worthless.
I mean, by definition, it doesn't make him worthless because he's got value right now that's going to decrease,
go down,
right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's again, what game are you playing? Right? Are you playing the game that's looking forward to a rookie draft in May? Is that the game you're playing, or is the game you're playing the one that wants to win? Right? Which game are you playing? And we've seen this, right? We've seen polls on this where people get more excited about rookie drafts and trading, and if you add up the rookie drafts, trading, and the off season, people are more interested in that than actually winning, right? That there's actual poll results that say that. It's incredible, right? It's an incredible fact that people pay money to play Dynasty and they're more interested in the non-money making aspects of Dynasty. It's incredible. But that's a true feature. And so, I mean, there's a ton of value right now. Like there's a ton of value in terms of like stuff that can really help you right now. Again, I remember one of the trades I made last year was it basically turned out to be Mac Jones for Devontae Adams. And the person was like, I want to look into the future. And I was like, I'm doing both, right? I'm doing both. I'm looking into the present with Devontae Adams, and I'm looking into the future with Devontae Adams because he's the type of wide receiver that can age well, right? He can age to a wide receiver one season next year. And that might even beat what Mac Jones's rest of his career looks like, right? I think there's a ton of opportunity to do those things, especially when you look up at the top of the board. Like that's why I'm super in on a guy like McCaffrey. Like that's why I really think about like those guys with a ton of value, like guys like getting guys like Adams, getting guys like Hill, that people that have fallen out of contention somehow with those guys on their roster, that those teams have fallen out of contention. Like there's a ton of value there, right? And if they want to take a reset, like you should absolutely be in on that. And I've been more and more open to that than at any point in my dynasty career.
Yep, good stuff there. And yeah, the declining profile, the older player, the producer, the guy that you may look at a 2-year lens instead of a 5-year lens. But you know what? Projecting 5 years out for any player, good luck. Start looking back at some ADP or some production lists from 2017, 2019, 2020, doesn't matter. The amount of churn you have in and out, where it's hard to get your brain around it when you go, oh, half of the running back ones this year won't be running back one next year. You're like, no, how is that possible?
Mm-hmm.
And then just go look. A good year, it might be, 7 or 8 out of the 12, a really good year. And then sometimes it might be 4 or 5. It's amazing that it's year over year, the churn that happens pretty much across positions, maybe except for the top 3, 4, 5 of tight end. And then, just the year over year consistency generally of quarterback ends up being a little better and a little stickier there, which is why, guess what? We gravitate towards profiles even more in those capacities. So for this week, we discussed Deshaun Watson, Matthew Stafford, key moments of their career, as well as a few others. Talked about dynasty trading, staying liquid, Christian McCaffrey, some of the risk factors of ACLs, the good work, of course, by the good doctor over there, Gene Bramble, multiple times per week, weighing us, keeping us straight with these injury situations and the outlook. I love the projected, weeks back. I typically forget, IR with eligibility to return. Is that week 15? Is that 16, 17? Is that out for the year? We need all that dialed in one precise document and one organizational notebook. And we have that over at Footballguys.
Best in the business.
I am Chad Parsons. He is Jordan McNamara. Good luck in your dynasty leagues.